Hello and welcome to class. I'm Trish Triumpho Sullivan and I'll be your instructor for painting A and B. That's ART6, A and B, watercolor and oils. So welcome to class. I'm excited to have you guys here. Well, this is lecture number 1. We're going to work on talking about what you need for the class, okay? So starting off with, it's a painting class, so you're going to need some paints. But before we get there, we're going to talk about how we're going to conduct this class. And the first thing that I want to tell you guys is if you can't draw it, you can't paint it. So you must be able to draw some basic drawings before you're able to paint, which is why I recommend this book, Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain, for you guys to use as we're starting off the class. We'll be doing some drawing, which will be practicing getting us ready to paint. Okay, so Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain, any edition, you can see mine is pretty well used. I've got notes in it and it's a little threadbare, but I use it all the time. It's not just for beginners, okay? Any time that you want to hone your skills and kind of up your game, do the exercises in that book over again. Do the same ones. You'll find you'll have a really good result from that. So the second thing that you're going to need for the class are some pencils and paper because you're going to do some drawing. So I recommend getting some kind of a sketch pad. This is 100 sheets and it's 9 inches by 12 inches. It does not have to be this brand, but it should say sketch on it. It's better quality paper than say computer paper, right? Printer paper, but it's not the best quality because we're going to be practicing with it, right? We don't need to have the top quality paper for that. As you move forward with painting and drawing, you may decide that it would be a good idea to get some mixed media paper. So mixed media paper is a better quality paper. So it means that you can draw and you can paint and do pen and ink on it. And so I use mine a lot when I'm creating commercial work, drawing or painting, because I'm able to use pen and ink, pencil, charcoal, and of course, watercolor. So I have a lot of fun with that. So those are a couple of things that you might need, or that you will need for this class. And so that's for the drawing portion. You'll need a couple of pencils. I recommend that you get a set of pencils, okay? I'm going to show you a couple. These are just a couple basic drawing pencils. But I know I showed on our class meeting, I showed you guys on Dick Blick what a pencil set would look like. So it'll have, maybe 4 or 5 pencils, maybe even 6 or 8 pencils for drawing. Usually they don't have erasers on them, so you'll see that they have just a tip on them. This is an H3 pencil, so it's a little bit darker lead. You'll need a pencil sharpener, and you'll need an eraser, right? Because you'll need to erase things, so it's good to buy a pencil set to use. And you'll need, so eraser, pencils, and sharpener. Okay, so that's really important, along with your pencils. So those are a couple of really important things. Now, that said, you're also going to be needing paint, right? I'm working with the school to see if we can get some scholarship paint. So if you're unable to access paint, we'll see if we can make sure we can get you guys some. And I'm going to start right off here to tell you that I'm going to be talking about 2 different kinds of paint. Right, I'm going to be talking about watercolor first. We'll talk about watercolors, and then I'll talk about oils after. And the big distinction between these 2 is that they don't mix. Okay, so watercolor is water-based. And oils are oil-based. And remember, oil and water doesn't mix. So you have to be using your watercolor brushes only for watercolor and your oil brushes only for oil. So you've signed up for this class. You're either in oils or you're in watercolors. So the paint that you get and the brushes that you get for your supplies are going to be either oil, right, or watercolor. So you don't mix them. You're not going to do both during this semester. You're going to either have oils, you're either in the oil class or in the watercolor class, right? So pretty straightforward. Most of you are in watercolor. So we're going to start off with watercolor, and I'll write down some supplies for you here that you're going to need. Remember that you're going to need, there's some things that you'll need for both. So for both, you're going to need a rag, right? So here's like a rag. This is like kind of a shop rag. You can buy a shop rag, right? You can use an old washcloth or hand towel. You can cut up an old like bath size towel into smaller pieces. You can cut up an old t-shirt. T-shirts work great. And I actually prefer t-shirt material for watercolor work because it's easy to use to blot up things if you have too much water. So you're going to need a rag or more, right? I recommend you have at least a couple so that if one gets wet or whatever, you can use the other one. You're going to need a sponge. I recommend a natural one. You're going to need a glass jar. And let me know what, let me write down these other things. So you'll need pencils. This is for everyone. A sketch, you're gonna need 2 sketch pads. One will be like 9 by 12 inches. And one will be small, like 5 by 7 or smaller, or less, okay? But this one you have to have. This is the 9 by 12. You can make a small sketchbook if you want on your own, just by using like computer paper and cut it up into little quarters and staple them together or put them together somehow. So rag sponge, natural sponge, a glass jar with cover, right? It needs to be a covered glass jar. Pencils, sketch pads, an eraser, and a sharpener. Okay, so these are some of the basic things you're going to need for both watercolor and oils. And there's a complete list on the syllabus. So look at the syllabus, okay? And then the other things that you're going to need that I recommend for this class, because it goes in the book, is you're going to need to make a picture plane. So I'm going to give you I'm going to do this demo for you. So don't stress about it yet. A picture plane, a viewfinder, and this is important. I need you to get a small black Expo marker. It can be a different brand, but it needs to have a fine tip on it. So, so it's the skinnier ones. All right, so these are some of the tools we're going to be using with the book, Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. Okay, so we're going to be using some of these tools. So I will do a demo on this, so don't worry about it yet. We're going to find out. But you will need this. You'll need a small black fine tip Expo, and that's for both classes, right? Because this has to do with the drawing portion of the class. Okay, so next, let's talk about what kind of paint and other supplies you need. So for watercolor, that's a dud, huh? Let's see if this one goes. There we go, nice. So for watercolor, you're gonna need paint and brushes. I recommend the Yarka brand paint. So this is a really good quality European or actually Russian brand that has good pigment. Pigment is the color in paint, right? That's what gives you the color. And inexpensive paints have a lot less pigment, which is why you don't have as good of results, right? You want it to be rich in pigment. Pigment's the expensive part of the paint, right? That's what gives it the color. So you'll often find that good quality watercolors are more expensive than the cheap ones. So if it's usually if you find something for, $5, it's probably not going to be good quality. This is going to be available through online through dickblick.com. Right? And so you'll need a watercolor set. These are semi-moist sets. So, and this brand is called Yarka. They make the best student watercolors. This is a 12 color kit, so or set. So you definitely would want to have this. Now, I'm going to talk about this really quick. Oftentimes you'll need some kind of a box or bag or container to keep your supplies in. An old tackle box works well. I don't think you need to buy anything new for this class, but I have people that have, kept all their painting supplies in the backpack. That's fine, right? But you have something to keep your supplies in one place is very helpful. So I have this, and let's talk about what other stuff you're going to need. You can see in my box I keep some little ends of paper from a watercolor paper pad. That's so I can test my colors before I put them onto my onto my paper, to my canvas, as we're going to quote it. And you can see I have my stuff organized. I've got brushes in one compartment and some other paints. These are gouache paints. I have my resist. This is expensive. Most students use rubber cement. So this is something you can buy at any, even grocery store will have little bags of rubber cement. So you'll need something to keep your stuff in, but it doesn't have to be anything fancy, okay? So let's talk about the couple most important things that you're going to need. You're going to need a brush. There it is. So I'm going to erase this and just put Yarka watercolor. So on Dick Blick, I think right now these are going for about $9. They're not super expensive, but they are really good quality, and they're much better than anything you can get, say, from Michael's or Hobby Lobby or any of those big box stores that don't really have quality products. I mean, they have products, but they're not the best quality always. So you'll need the paint, and you'll need brushes. Okay, ideally you have at least 2 brushes, so 2 is the minimum. You'll need 1 round and 1 flat. Right. So this flat one here is a 3/4 inch. So I would recommend this size of a flat watercolor brush. Notice that the handle is short. Okay, so it's a fairly short-handled brush, and it's a synthetic bristle. So synthetic bristles are just fine for this class. but I think a 3/4 inch flat brush, whoops, oh, that didn't work out very well, did it? So a 3/4 inch flat brush would be very good to have. The other one you're going to need is a round brush. A good quality round brush, notice again it's short handle, which is like watercolor, will have a very fine tip on it so you can do very fine work, okay? So even though it looks like a big brush, it's much more versatile than a little tiny skinny one. This one is a number 12. So those are the sizes I recommend. Now you have some time to get these things together, so don't stress over not having everything on the first day of class, okay, you guys? You'll notice in my kit here, I have a few other things that I think are really important, and you'll also notice that I have a few different sizes of brushes. And that's because I do this stuff all the time, so I have not just one flat brush, but like 4 flat brushes. I don't have just one round brush, I have 4 round brushes in different sizes. So it's good to have a little bit of variety here, okay? And I use all the different ones. So these are all ones that I use on a regular basis in my painting. So you'll need the brushes. I also recommend and let me show you a sponge really quick. So here's like what here's a couple of examples of natural sponges. You can get sponges like this at a hardware store like Ace Hardware. They're fairly inexpensive there. If you go to an art supply store, they tend to be on the pricey side. Regular sponges will work, but a lot of times they have soap in them, and that not compatible with watercolors, so it'll mess up your painting. But natural sponges are a necessity for any kind of painting. This goes for oils and watercolors. So this is natural sponges. Let me just put that down there. We wrote about it on the other one, but right. And then you'll also need a palette. This is a palette that you can buy at like a Michael's or a Hobby Lobby, right? This is a little plastic palette. They come in different shapes and sizes. You can also use a white ceramic plate or even a white paper plate. But it needs to be white so you can actually see the colors in it, okay? So a palette. You'll need some kind of a palette. Like I said, you don't have to buy all this stuff. You can sometimes find these kind of things around the house. Watercolors are water cleanup, so it won't hurt if you use a white plate, okay? That'll be fine. In a palette. I also recommend that you get some painter's tape, okay? Painter's tape will allow you to do some masking. The painter's tape comes in different colors and sizes. Try to get either a skinny one like this or a wider one like this. This is, I think, probably about 3/4 inch or 1 inch. And this is a 1/2 inch size. So you can see they're just, this is another that you can get at like a hardware store, okay? And once again, rubber cement. We'll talk about that a little bit too. Remember, these are not supplies that you have to get all at once. But you are going to need them for the class. You want to start collecting this stuff now. You know, get your rag, right? Make sure you have a few rags that you can use. Right? Make sure you have a glass jar with a cover. Yeah, just start collecting them. Put them in a box or something, or a closet or whatever, a drawer where you can get this stuff together. So rubber cement is something you use for masking, as is the painter's tape. And these are really important techniques that we'll be using in class. Another thing that I highly recommend you get is raid your little brother or sister's crayon box and see if you can find a white crayon, right? Here's a little piece of a white crayon. It'll last you forever. You'll never have to buy another white crayon in your life. This is another thing for using for masking, and we'll talk about this, about all these things later, but masking is something that you'll be doing with your watercolor. It's a really important part of watercolor technique, and having a white crayon is incredibly helpful. So kids never use the white crayons, so they'll never miss it, right? So if you abscond with a white crayon or even break a piece off, they're not going to be too bothered. So a white crayon. Right, that's an important one. And let's see what else. Oh, and this is an example of one of the rags that I would use. This is an old t-shirt, right? You can see it has holes in it. And you know, once you have one, you can reuse it over and over again. It's not something that you throw away. You just wash it, okay? If it gets too funky, it'll all wash right out, right? So we got crayon. Let's see, what else am I missing here? It seemed like there was something I was thinking of that you guys needed, and I'm looking in my box to. Oh, I know. Okay, so a toothbrush, old toothbrush. This is really important. Make sure that you get an old toothbrush. Don't go out and buy one. Okay, you don't need a new one. Just get an old one. You can, you know, wash it with soap and water or boil it or something if you're concerned about germs. But instead of throwing it away, you'll use this a lot in your painting. So this is like for pick techniques. So old toothbrush. Right, something that you're going to be using quite a bit. All right, and then of course you're going to need some watercolor paper. I don't have a pad of watercolor paper, but you want at least 140-pound cold pressed. So you can buy it in a notebook, like a spiral notebook size. And once again, I'd like you to get either 9 by 12. Let me write this down, watercolor paper. We'll write it right here where the old toothbrush is, and I'll move the toothbrush down. So 140-pound cold pressed. Right, 140-pound cold pressed watercolor paper. You can get it in a book, like a spiral book, kind of like this, right? You see, 9 by 12 is going to be the minimum size. I actually prefer that you get 11 by 14 inches, right? Or in that area. So that a little slightly bigger than 9 by 12 for that one. We'll write old toothbrush down here. Yeah, need that. Okay, so watercolor paper, very important. You'll notice that with your watercolor paper, and I have a couple little small things, it should be fairly thick and stiff. You can see here, and I'll bring this close up, you should be able to see a little bit of a texture on it. Right? And one side's a little smoother and one side's a little more textured. The textured side is the side that you paint on, all right? So that's the basics of watercolor stuff. I don't think I missed anything, but if I did, you know, we'll go back over it. Professional watercolorists, instead of rubber cement, will use this kind of masking stuff. It's kind of on the expensive side. This is a enmascador, right? There we go. So you can kind of see that. You don't need this. Rubber cement works just fine, but I wanted to show it to you so you could see what people use on a very, so to go over again, you'll need a watercolor set. Yarka is the one I recommend, a 12 color one. You'll need 2 brushes, 1 round and 1 flat, a number 12 round, a 3/4 inch flat, a natural sponge, a palette, right? And it could just be a white plate, a white ceramic plate, a painter's tape, rubber cement, a white crayon, and an old toothbrush. Don't forget rags and a glass jar. Plus you'll need some watercolor paper. Remember, you don't need these right away, right? You're gonna be doing more drawing first, but you will need to start collecting this stuff. So that's all really important. So that's the watercolors. Now let's move on to oils. And some of the oil stuff is the same kind of thing, right? There's a certain brush that you'll need the same size brushes for oils, right? And remember, there's lots of different styles of brushes and quality of brushes. Synthetic bristles are just fine. That you don't need to have natural bristles. Natural bristles can be really expensive. So I'm going to close up my watercolor kit and open up my oils. And it's heavier than I'll get out because I got all kinds of stuff in it. So this is the kit that I use for my oils. It's a basic painter's box. You often will see these when people are doing plein air painting, but I've got a lot of stuff in here. So for painting with oils, you're going to need a couple of other things that we don't have for watercolors. But once again, the first thing you're going to need is brushes and paint. So for oils, you'll need 2 brushes. So this is for oils. Right? 1 round. And 1 flat. Right? Those are the minimum size brushes that you're going to need, or the minimum amount of brushes you're going to need. So 1 round and 1 flat. Whoops, what did I do? Oh, here's my brush. So I have like a kit that I keep all my brushes in, a flat thing, but you don't have to have anything this fancy. You can have a brush roll, and I'll show you like an inexpensive brush roll. My recommendation is you having 1 flat and 1 round brush. And these 2 sizes, let's see, so the flat is a number 12, right? And this round one I have here is a number 8. So those are the sizes I would recommend, right, for you to start with. You can get some other sizes, but these are the ones I would recommend size-wise for you for this class. Let me get these back in the case. Okay. But as you can see, I have a variety of different size brushes, right? Because I use a lot of different size canvases and that kind of thing. So that I have that. So you'll need 2 brushes, right? And you're going to need some turpenoid. Or basically turpentine substitute. Okay, I'm going to pause this video and we will start with part 2, where I give you the more information that you need. All right, we'll see you in part 2 of the painting video. Welcome painting video.